At AARP Missouri, we want to support you as you age. But first, you should learn a little more about us. AARP is a nonprofit organization working to help adults 50 plus in Missouri live their lives to the fullest. We advocate for over 700,000 members on important issues such as strengthening Social Security, protecting access to health care, and ensuring everyone has independence and choice as they age. AARP Missouri also offers online tools, resources, and programs you can access right from the comfort of your home. Learn how to protect yourself from fraud and scams with the AARP Fraud Watch Network. Become an active part of AARP Missouri as a virtual volunteer. Find support while caring for a loved one through our caregiving resources. And enjoy a variety of fun virtual events that improve your health and wellness, like our exercise series, Moving It. At AARP Missouri, there's an entire community waiting for you. Learn more about us at aarp.org/mo.
Hi, I'm Diane Hall from AARP Missouri. November is National Caregiver Month, and today we'll be talking to AARP's National and Family Caregiving expert, Amy Goyer. Amy, thank you for joining us again.
Absolutely. It's always a pleasure.
And it's always great to have you here, and I'm glad to have you here again. Your professional and personal experiences make you uniquely qualified to connect caregivers to the resources and services they need. And today we're going to be talking with Amy, and she's going to share some specific advice for new caregivers, how all caregivers can get help with in-home medical tasks, but it's especially a challenge for new caregivers, as well as share about some legislation that will help caregivers. Now, Amy, I've asked you about your personal caregiving journey in all of our chats, but just for somebody who might have just stumbled across this the first time, can you tell a little bit about your journey, but especially about what it was like when you were a first-time new caregiver?
Got it. Yeah. I was in college when I was the first real caregiving experience I had, and that was for my grandparents. And it was interesting because I was young, but I was training to be a music therapist. So I was had a lot done field work in the field of aging, and I kind of was starting to become familiar. But it's still like deer in the headlights. You know, my dad was trying to figure out helping my grandparents from 2,000 miles away because they were in Arizona. My grandparents were in Indiana. I was in Ohio. We were just trying to figure out, okay, what they need. And, you know, when you first thrust into it, you try to identify what the greatest need is and deal with that. But then the needs keep changing. So, you know, the getting the lay of the land is really hard. You know, I didn't live in the town where my grandparents live. I don't know people there. I don't know the systems there and everything. So that's one of the hardest things when you're first a caregiver. And later that was true too with and you know, Diane, it's kind of like that's the first time I really had an intense caregiving experience. But every time you get a new person, and I'm kind of like a serial caregiver where I've cared for numerous people in the row. And every time you have a new experience, it's new again. You know, I've been in different states. My mom had a stroke. She lived in Arizona. We had to figure all that out and getting her the rehab and what's the best place in the area and, you know, getting thrust into that. And then later my sister who lived in Maryland and to try and figure out and help her find resources and support and help. And she had a completely different health condition than my parents or my grandparents had had. So, you know, understanding that health condition and trying to help and support her there. So every time there's something new, you know, and every time it's a little bit overwhelming.
Well, and my experience is not as vast as yours because I'm not sure I like the term serial caregiver because that sounds a little bit wrong, but I understand what you mean.
Doesn't it? But yeah.
In my experience, the caregiving thing doesn't necessarily get easier the more times you do it because it is so different every time. Mm-hmm. And everyone that we care for has some kind of different need for support. And talk a little bit more about the range of things that you've dealt with, particularly as they came up as the new thing.
Right. So, I mean, first of all, the new thing was doing it long distance. With my grandparents being 6.5 hours away. I mean, that was a new thing. And while Alzheimer's wasn't completely new to me because I had done some field work and I was working in adult daycare eventually. It's still new every time. The first time that my grandmother, I remember being at her house and I was doing cross stitch, needlework, and she had been quite a needle worker. She did needlepoint and she just was, I did quilting, she was amazing. And she swore that I had stolen that from her.
Oh.
The first time that happened, it was like, oh, I knew what to do because of my training, but it was still just that heartbreak of it. So sometimes that's the hard part, is the emotional aspect of when something is new and there's a change. With my mom, she had a stroke, but she had aphasia from the stroke. So she knew what she wanted to say, but couldn't get the words out. And so she had a communication disorder for 25 years after she had a stroke. She died when she was 87. And so getting used to how to communicate with her and figuring that out and trying to figure out what she was talking about and all of that, that was really hard. And it's also really emotional. And then with my sister, she had Cushing disease, which who's ever heard of Cushing disease, right? And she had a tumor on her pituitary gland, and she had numerous health issues that were a result of that. So that was a new path to try and figure out. So every new health condition, trying to figure out the long distance, it's just all the systems are different. Sometimes you feel like you're stumbling in the dark.
Well, and the learning curve, I think, is steep and a little bit unforgiving for a new caregiver, particularly when it comes to, the emotional things. It's painful, but you can get through that.
Yeah.
But when it comes to some of the things that you have to know how to do, because your person depends on that. The medical tasks in particular are one of those things. And I don't know if you can highlight some of that.
Yeah, and in fact, as soon as you said that, it brought to mind, my dad had something called a Zenker's diverticulum in his esophagus. It was a little, like a pocket in his esophagus. Food would get trapped there and then come back up, and he would choke on it. And he was sick with a different issue, in the hospital, sick with that issue. But being sick, he didn't deal with that as well, and he aspirated and got pneumonia. So they convinced me that he needed to have a feeding tube, just short term, until he could have that throat surgery. Well, it took 2 months to get him into a specialist, get the surgery scheduled and all that. And that was, they gave me like 5 minutes on what to do with the feeding tube. And we brought him home and we had home health care, thank goodness. I'm a pretty strong advocate, as you can imagine. And I had that home health agency out there all the time with the nurses dealing with that feeding tube. That was completely new to me. I'd never dealt with a feeding tube. And, those kinds of things happened. My mom fell and fractured her spine in 2 places and couldn't walk. And so she had to go through surgery. And it was a very intensive, dangerous surgery. Those are the things that make you feel like, I don't know how to deal with this. The medical equipment. My mom had skin tears a lot. She would barely hit something and her skin was so thin and fragile, she'd get these tears. And if you're a caregiver, a lot of you have dealt with this. The skin flap comes over and you have to kind of put it over and you have to put the right bandages on it. And maybe it's not working. And then I used to have a wound care nurse who would come and they gave us all kinds of, eventually I got to be pretty darn good at dealing with skin tears. But those are the things that, you don't walk into this experience knowing how to do that stuff.
Well, and heretofore, nobody would teach you. Your loved one would be in the hospital for whatever, and then they would release them, and it would be like, go take care.
Yeah. Good luck. You're on your own. Now there is more home and community-based services, and we do a lot of coaching of family caregivers to ask for that help, to say, and it comes to mind the Missouri CARES Act that requires hospitals to provide that instruction and make sure that you're getting what you needed, and to keep caregivers informed of changes and discharge planning and that sort of thing. We really are trying to help family caregivers know the right questions to ask and feel confident in asking them.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is one of those things. The passage of the CARE Act is not brand new here in Missouri. It's been around a little bit. However, make sure and ask before you leave, because there should be someone there when your loved one is being released from a facility who should be able to walk you through that. I had the similar experience to you, Amy. My mom had a feeding tube, and it was just kind of, yeah, and here's what you do, and you do that, and there you go.
Yeah.
If I hadn't had home health who came in and said, oh, well, did you know that you could use Coca-Cola to clear out that clog or what? No, I had no idea. So they had a lot of practical stuff. And that was before the CARE Act passed here in Missouri. With it now, there's a lot more training and things that you can get before you go home so that you're a little bit better prepared, because the medical and nursing tasks, I think, are one of the most daunting challenges for a new caregiver.
Right. And the majority of us who are caregiving do have some sort of medical nursing task, whether it's medication management, wound care, dealing with the medical equipment. My dad was later on oxygen. A lot of us have dealt with oxygen. It's a lot. It's a lot. And AARP has some great resources. I'm going to go ahead and tell you this now. AARP has some videos at aarp.org/no-longer-alone. And they are videos and guides on dealing with some of these medical nursing tasks, including some of the things we've been talking about, and incontinence, which is another, like, who knows how to deal with incontinence? We've never dealt with that, and so there are things like that, mobility, helping people get around safely, that sort of thing too.
Yeah, absolutely. Finding just those resources in one place, and not that we can't explain it, because Amy and I both done both of them. I've done feeding tubes, I've done incontinence, I've done oxygen therapy, all those kinds of things. And we can talk about it for way longer than anybody would want to listen. But if you can watch it in a video, I think you'll understand it better, and it will be clearer for you. So those videos are a great, great resource, as well as there are community resources that are out there as well.
Yes. And, I always tell people, I can do anything. I mean, I did things as a caregiver. When my mom was in the hospital, she got C. diff. I was taking care of her just as much as the nurses were and the aides were. I've done stuff I never dreamed I would do. So I can do anything, but I cannot do everything. And there's a big difference. And once I embraced that as a caregiver, that was kind of freeing, because sometimes we feel like we should be able to do everything. And that's just not realistic. It's not practical. So I say we have to build a team. Now, some people say, okay, I don't have any family. I'm alone. And I get that. But most people's teams are not just family. You have the doctors, the nurses, the home health aides. You have your pharmacist. Our pharmacist was so helpful, where I would call him about medication issues and everything. I had a concierge, my dear friend Debbie, who saved me over and over. And she would check on my parents, or she would do things like go run errands for me, help me decorate for the holidays, because that made us all happy and filled our tanks. She helped me organize an anniversary celebration for my parents, all the stuff that you just don't have time to do. And she was a great moral support. Actually, she ended up being a close friend. So something like that. You have AARP. We're a part of your team. And that's why we have all these resources for you. You can go to aarp.org/caregiving. It's all there for you. And we are a part of your team, as well as your local area agency on aging, of course, your AARP Missouri State office. That team is broader than just family. So think about it that way. And I'll tell you, I made a list one time, and I show this when I give speeches, because I show family, and then I show, the 30 other kinds of people who are helpful to us. And that makes you feel much more supported. So you've got to build a team.
Well, that's one of the things that my main caregiving experience was in a very, very small town. So it was a very tight-knit community. So if you knew one person, you knew everybody, because they knew somebody else who knew somebody else. But for, those of us who now live maybe in a bigger place or in a little bit bigger small town, there are other organizations out there that can help you navigate some of that. Can you talk a little bit about that? Because I know you've had experience with the AAAs and with the VA. So could you say a little bit about putting those people on your team?
Absolutely. Again, starting with the area agency on aging, there are area agencies on aging cover either multiple county areas. In some cases, it's one county or one city if it's a highly populated area. in every single state. They're divided up differently in each state. They get funding from the Older Americans Act and from the State Unit on Aging, and they coordinate and they fund services in your area, and they have kind of that big picture view of what's available to help you. They also offer caregiver support programs that are specifically for you as a caregiver. So the Area Agency on Aging can be a really helpful part of your team. And the VA was just a deal breaker kind of part of our team. Once I got my dad enrolled in VA healthcare, and AARP has a wonderful new healthcare benefits navigator for veterans and military service members that you can access, and it kind of walks you through how do I know if they're eligible? How do I find out? Where do I call? We give you all the phone numbers and the websites and everything. The VA provided for us home health aides to come. In the end, they came every morning to help us get Daddy out of bed and get him bathed. We had medical equipment, his medications, which for Dad was all free. It varies depending on the, when you served and what your service and what your disability is and that sort of thing. But for Dad, there was no cost for most of his medications. We had respite care. In the end, they arranged the hospice care for my dad. We had, I think I said they gave us ramps. They have grants for home modifications. Huge part of our team. Eventually, my dad had home-based primary care, Diane, and that was the biggest change because they came to the house. A nurse was our case manager. He came every week. Nurse practitioner came whenever we needed her, and definitely pretty much every other week. They ordered home health aides. They ordered the respite care. They ordered medication. They'd say, "Oh, you need this piece of equipment. We'll get that ordered for you." It was amazing.
I just can't imagine doing all the things that I know you did and some of the things that I know I did without some of those community-based supports who actually come to the house, who get the equipment, who show you how to use it, who tell you, oh, you need to contact this thing or that person, or here's the paperwork. A lot of this stuff does come through the AAAs, and I say AAAs because I'm using shorthand and that's bad, but the area agencies on aging. And I will say in Missouri in particular, the area agencies on aging, each one have a different name here. They're not called that, but if you search online for that, or AARP.org will have them as well, you can find those, and you can find the one that covers your area, because Amy's right, they cover different chunks of Missouri. St. Louis kind of has its own, Kansas City kind of has its own. The rest of the state is more rural and less populated, so it's kind of spread out. It's a great starting place, as well as AARP's website, which is aarp.org/caregiving, has a lot of good information and connects you to those things that you need when you're a brand new caregiver and you just aren't sure what to do. We're kind of running close to the end of our time, and I hate to do that, because first-time caregivers and new caregivers are the ones who really are a little bit more urgently in need of help. So can you talk a little bit about kind of what is the first thing that they ought to do as a new caregiver?
I think once you embrace the fact that you can't do everything, you need to build a team. You have to get organized, and you start learning. You reach out to the organizations. You get help with the medical and nursing tasks. Don't take no for an answer. Keep asking for that and question. Get the instruction that you need. The Missouri Care Act has been passed that helps make sure that you can ask for that instruction, which is, again, so important. And you can. I think the key thing is to know that it's okay that you don't know everything. And one of the most helpful things is to connect with other family caregivers. So the first thing I would have you do if you're a new caregiver is join the AARP Family Caregivers discussion group on Facebook. I moderate the group. We have more than 7,000 members. If you post any question on there, and there's going to be somebody who's been through that and who can give you some advice or who can give you a resource. I'm in there every day. I give links, resources. We had someone who had a Medicaid question the other day. Everybody had some help for them. We have people who deal with, dementia issues or home safety, or how do I get my loved one to eat more? There just is a million things, and you can vent and support. You have to know that you're not the only one going through this. So I really, urge you to do that, and visit aarp.org/caregiving. If you're dealing with medical and nursing issues, you can go /health after that, aarp.org/caregiving/health. That goes right to all of our medical information. And then, of course, we have the Home Alone videos at aarp.org/no longer alone.
And I'm glad that you mentioned the Facebook thing, because that was on the tip of my tongue to ask you next, because I think that support and just breadth and depth of knowledge that's kind of 24/7 because it's on Facebook is just an awesome place to go when you just are kind of at your wit's end.
Yes, I agree. I mean, the support that's there, and people, get on there and they say, I can't do this one more day. And there's always people there to say, oh, we've got you. You can do this. We're here for you, and it helps you get through that crisis moment.
Absolutely. I've heard you speak, a bunch of times over the years, and, I can do anything, but I can't do everything. That is so true. And that group will reinforce it for you. And make it okay that you can't do everything.
Yes, exactly. Success as a caregiver doesn't mean you think of everything, that you prevent every fall or every problem, that you solve everything. Being a successful caregiver is being there. It's getting back up when you get knocked down. It's being resilient. It's just doing your best. And I always think of it as walking alongside my loved ones in their journey with their health. I'm there for you. It's the one thing I always knew that I could do. I didn't want to feeling like a failure doesn't really help us. So if I always knew the one thing I could guarantee my family is that I would never give up, and I would always be there for them, and I would always do my best to help.
Yeah. And watching you, particularly with your dad, I can say that you were literally beside him all the time, most of the time singing.
Yes, most of the time singing. That's one of my good tips. If you're caregiving, use music as your tool. It's just an incredible tool, especially if you're caring for somebody with dementia. It was our constant companion.
Well, Amy, thank you so much for sharing your time and your information about caregiving with us during National Caregivers Month. It's been such a pleasure chatting with you this month.
You too, Diane. I always love working with you. And, I look forward to seeing the comments that people post and helping answer any questions that may come up.
Well, I want to thank our viewers for tuning in as well and joining to learn about caregiving. Please share this video and some of the other chats that we've had with Amy so that others can take advantage of the information if they may need it. You can visit aarp.org/caregiving for more information and resources anytime. Don't forget that AARP Missouri has an online family caregiver resource guide at aarp.org/mo caregiver resources. And if you'd like to find other ways to connect with AARP for more information or just some fun, you can go to aarp.org/near-you. And don't forget to like AARP Missouri's Facebook page and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Thanks for watching.